This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. It's episode 199 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. We're one away from episode 200, which is going to be a very, very special episode. It's pre-recorded. I'll tell you more about it later, but that one is coming up probably midweek, and then we'll do a live show as we do every Sundays at 10 o'clock a.m. A little bit of a change today. We're doing it at 10:30. But we're going to have a lot of fun today. Shout out to all of you guys that are in the chat. You guys got started before I even was able to log in this morning. So I appreciate that. Lane Kerner in here. Nelson Cruz as well. Duran Rivera, appreciate you for being here. Patty in NYC. Duran, we got also, I think I said Duran Rivera. I'm in here in the chat as well. How about that? And then we got my guy, Carlos Ramos as well in here, and Stanley Babbage. Appreciate you guys. D as well. Thank you so much. G Money Stacks and the Back It Up Binge podcast. Appreciate everyone for being in here, tuning in. A lot to talk about, and I'm going to bring on my guest right off the bat here. Dexter Henry, sports anchor for New York Post Sports, update anchor for WFAN and Infinity Sports Network. He hosts the New York Got Game, and if you have not been a part of the live streams for each and every postseason game for the New York Knicks, you need to be a part of that. Even though they're down 2-0, the series not over yet. I said they would win in 7. I'm sticking to that right now. Also, lead host of Urban Fitness Extreme. I think, Dexter, I got every single one of the accolades and your I don't want to say jobs, but everything. We got it all. We got it all packed in there.
Yeah, you got it all packed in. It's good, man. And always a pleasure to see you. Knicks down 0-2, but hey, got a chance tonight. It's gonna be fun. Basketball's every other day, so tapping. We'll do another live stream tonight. I'll share more of that later, but yeah, tapping with us for sure.
Dexter, you and me had this conversation off air about Friday, and I said, you know what? Let me get you on. Let's do this Sunday morning, especially with the games being tonight. Both the Mets and the Knicks are playing in the evening. And I wanted to talk to you, start off with this Juan Soto drama that has been created. I want to put a nail in the coffin to it, because I feel like it has taken over what has been a pretty good start to the Mets season. They've kind of been going through their lumps, and it happens every year. Every team goes through this at some point. Last year it happened in this month as well, to a even worse extent. So it hasn't been that bad, but we are here. You know, the Mets are struggling a little bit, and obviously the close to $800 million man is the focus, because he's making close to $800 million. But you know, when we talked off air and all of this conversation, especially conversation that is coming from other networks and guys that represent other teams, coming from the Subway series, all the talk about what has been thought of what is in the psyche of Juan Soto and him being a New York Met. And, you know, Michael Kay has, and I preface him because he really called out a lot of content creators. He lumped us all into one big group, calling us fleas, and we'll get into that. But this all started with him saying, and I'm pretty sure he does know people from the Mets side of things. And obviously he knows people from the Yankee side, since he works for Yes Networks. But I listened to his clip, and you guys posted a great, I think it's about 7 minutes on New York Post Sports. If you haven't seen it yet, please go on there. But it's a clip from his show, and I just took out some keywords of things that he was saying, because it's very, very important to decipher some of the comments that he's made. You know, from him saying, you know, this is what I came up with. That a straight up quote from Michael Kay himself. Yeah, people in the know on the Mets side, and he goes, they can deny it all they want, but he claims that Juan Soto is very glum. And he says from the Yankees side of things, they said he has no joy in his play and was pumped up to play with the Yanks and was engaged with them. And you know, obviously coming from the Yankees side of thing, that would make sense to say so those type of words. And we've seen Juan Soto play, and yes, he hasn't been himself, but he also hasn't played to the best of his ability yet. We also don't know what kind of person he is. We've only been with him for 2 months of the season, so we're getting different angles and different views from him. They say he doesn't feel comfortable, that there isn't a fit, and even now going to Michael Kay saying from the Mets side, people say that he's rubbing players the wrong way, that him having the suite has been an issue. He thinks he's not happy because he just wanted to return to the Mets. And this is from people that he's saying that are trusted within the Mets and that they can deny it all he wants. His family wanted him to go to the Mets. It wasn't his choice. It wasn't his decision. And that Cohen was a big influence. But for me, it didn't feel that way when he signed the contract or when it came out that he was going to sign with the Mets and we watched him celebrate at a party. He didn't seem upset then to become a New York Met. Why would he choose the Mets and upset the apple cart of knowing what was in store for him when he made that decision, what was going to be coming at him if he doesn't sign with the Yankees and he comes to the Mets? He got full force of what happened at the Subway Series. Why would he want to endure that? And just, I don't know. It's something that it's hard for me to believe, even though Michael Kay has the credentials.
All the talk around this has annoyed me, if I'm being honest. I will say this. Michael Kay has done what he has done for a long time. I do not agree with the energy he had, particularly coming for content creators. I'm not here, Anthony, you know this very well about me. I'm not here for gatekeeping, which I think is a lot of what he was engaging with and what he was saying in attacking content creators out there who put a lot of good work, talented content creators, podcasters like yourself, and others who I have a ton of respect for. Look, are there people who aggregate stuff online and try to do stuff for views and clicks? Sure. But there's journalists who do that too. I want to be very clear about that. There's radio hosts who do this as well too. I also want to be clear about that. So, and I think there could be some criticism to Michael Kay that what he was doing was to engage and rile up an audience, right? There's people that engage in that. Anthony, I know that's not something you do here with your content. I've followed for years and watched, and we've collaborated on things together. So I just want to say, first of all, I think that Michael Kay calling content creators fleas is shameful. You come across old. I mean that in the sense of what you're doing. Out of touch, archaic. Sports journalism and content creation is something that is always evolving. And I've always been taught by my mentors, different people, you have to evolve with what's going on. I always have a special place. I've talked about this publicly before for content creators because I come from content creation. I am a journalist, but I had to create a lot of my own content on my own. So when I see people attacking content creators, or especially the ones who do it right and try to do the right by the content and the fans, I think that's wrong. So there seemed to be a lot of insecurity. And what I also will say, going further in that, now that we've got that out the way, when you look at this stuff, guys, Anthony, I talked about this a little bit. We were texting the other day. You got to look at where the timing of when things come out and where they're coming from. This stuff all came out right before the Subway Series, right? Juan Soto's not happy. We know Juan Soto struggles and all this other stuff. I get it. I think the timing is interesting. I think where it's coming from is interesting. I'm not saying that, Michael Kay is lying or he doesn't talk to people in the Mets. I'm sure he does. I'm sure he knows some people in the Mets. What I do find interesting is the people who are around the Mets every day, the beat reporters, my colleague Mike Puma, and others who are around the Mets every day. Where's the reporting from them on this? The columnists respected. I'll put the ones I work with, Joel Sherman, John Heyman. They're as plugged in as anybody. Where's this? Jeff Passan. I haven't heard him say anything about this. These are the guys I would say are most plugged in with baseball, the most sources in this, can talk to people in these front offices, and you're not hearing it. I would say, listen, I'm still a believer in journalism. There's issues within journalism, but I will look at the trusted sources and who's reporting things around it. And that's no shade to anybody hosting on the radio, because this is no shade at all. But those people are not around the team on a daily basis. This isn't the first time we've seen this too, folks. I just want to be clear. Last year, there were, I'm putting air quotes, reports about Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso, the vibes with him in the locker room wasn't good. I haven't heard there were no players that said this. There were no beat reporters that said this at all whatsoever. So all I'm saying is sometimes you got to watch where things are coming from. And when people are called out for where it's coming from and they get a bit sensitive, which is, I think, what we saw from Michael Kay, he clearly got sensitive about this. You have to ask yourself why. And how sensitive and how personally he was and how he attacked the content creators, you got to ask yourself why. I think the way he reacted was poor. I think the actions speak loudly for themselves. I think he should be ashamed. I think he should apologize. I don't think he will. I think he should. I don't think he will, Anthony. But I think his actions speak for himself. And look, man, in whether Juan Soto's happy or not, this is another thing I'll add. You said something, Anthony. You said we have no idea. We don't know Juan Soto. He's just been around the Mets. We don't know exactly his temperament with the Mets and how he is with this organization, all that stuff. And you're right. Another thing I would just I'm not reporting anything or saying I know anything because I don't. Be very clear about this. But I say this about all athletes in all sports. You have no idea what's going on in their lives personally. You have no idea what's going on. Something could be or not be going on in Juan Soto's life. We like to act like we all come to work every day. We try to come to work every day and be a professional and give 100%. I think everybody tries to do that. You want to see that from athletes. These are their jobs. This is their livelihood. Some of them get paid a lot of money. But sometimes you could be going through something personally and you're trying to give 100% and you're just not able to give your best. Doesn't mean it's not an excuse. It's just that's part of life. All of us have probably experienced something where something has gone on with us personally in our lives where, you know what, if we look back at it, we're like, I tried to give my best at work, but I wasn't my best. That happens sometimes. So when people bring up all the speculation or things and we haven't heard it from Juan Soto himself, because that's what I'm going to put it on. We have not heard this from Juan Soto himself, that he is unhappy. There are things going on. We haven't heard it from him. We haven't heard it from fellow players. Until I hear from Juan Soto himself or people that are around him, this is all nonsense to me. And I just think it's sometimes there are people within a fan base, out of a fan base. There are Yankee fans, some even publicly, who are still salty about the fact that Juan Soto chose the Mets. And they're looking for a way to say, look, see, this went bad because he's off to a subpar start. And we'll get into this more, I'm sure. Anthony, am I worried about Juan Soto? No, I'm not worried about Juan Soto.
You can't be. You can't be worried about Juan Soto because the Mets and players who've come here and signed big contracts have gone through this. We've seen this before. Mike Piazza, Hall of Famer, Mets Hall of Famer, has his number retired at Citi Field, went through this when he got here. When he got traded here, he went through this. Carlos Beltran, he went through it for an entire season. He was not good in 2005 when he first got here. He signed the biggest contract in Mets history at that time. He was not good. It took him a while. It even took him a while into 2006 with the help of Julio Franco to have him embrace the fan base. And even still, after that, that called strike 3, he still was dealing with stuff. And he had a great season that year. Francisco Lindor, most recently, through the last couple of seasons, has dealt with it and has finally come through it. It's kind of like a rite of passage when you sign a big contract in New York and you got to go through these issues. So I have no worries about Juan Soto right now. Yes, the demeanor is off. Yes, he doesn't look like he's happy at the moment in time, but his production, I wouldn't be happy if I'm getting paid this amount of money and I'm not coming through in big spots. That's not his MO. That's not the type of player he is. And maybe he's not going to be that rah-rah guy. We just came off of the OMG Mets and all this fun surrounding the Mets. You could talk about all the outside stuff and how much fun they were having when they went into the playoffs, and how, you know, it's a little bit of a different team right now. And Juan Soto is, he's got to adapt. He's got to, you know, ingrain himself with the team. You talked about Pete Alonso and them people in the clubhouse saying, or you know, the speculation that he wasn't getting along. Pete Alonso's a specific type of cat. You know, he beats at his own drum, but that doesn't mean that he's not a part of the team. That does not mean he doesn't get along with the rest of the team. We don't know what's going on in the clubhouse. And that's why I rely on, like you said, like the guys that are there, Mike Puma. I've had some of these guys on my show. Like, I know that, and I hate to go do the back and forth because that's not the type of person I am. But when you call out content creators and you call them fleas and they're not worth anything, like, you know, we work very hard. It's not a job. Let's start that off. It's not a job. I create content because I love doing it. I love having conversations with you and a lot of my other guests. I love the chat and all the stuff we've been going on with the chat as well. So it's, you know, to have on guys like Will Salmon, Pat Ragazzo from Sports Illustrated. I've had on everybody, Tim Healy, who was a part of the Mets beat, Laura Albanese, who's a part of the Mets beat.
Yep.
No one has mentioned any of this at all. There's been no conversation about him and his parents being a part. And I want to post this. I have this little snippet here because this is where Michael Kay comes in. And, you know, I know that he gets hit a lot from critics too, Mets and Yankees. Even Yankee fans call him out. And to go on this kind of, you know, ego trip here, you know, being and telling everyone I'm the Yankee announcer, I've done all this and been where all these places are, and I know all these people. I mean, if that's the case, then you don't have to really get upset about anything.
Right. It wouldn't bother you.
It shouldn't bother you. Yeah. You shouldn't have to call out content creators. And like you said, it's kind of gatekeeping. And I don't know if the term like legacy media, I know that gets thrown around in the political world, but you know, in the sports world, that kind of happens a lot. And that's where some of us, like myself, and you've had to create your own content to try to get to a certain point where, you know, you can be, you know, the sports anchor with New York Post Sports, or you can do all these other things. We have to create our own to get our foot in the door.
Yeah. And I think I love that point you brought up there, Anthony. I think that's what bothered me the most about what he said. Is that content creation, if you want to like put it into that sphere, has opened doors for a lot of people. There are people I know who are then able to do this full time as a job, which then tells you the value that fans and other people have in the content that person's making. What he said that bothered me is he was saying it as though what some content creators are doing have no value. That and that showed me how out of touch you are. Because if that's the case, then what I would say is if Michael Kay could do what you do, or some of the other great content creators out there, all right, it's that easy. Get away from your platforms that you have, set up a video camera, set up a mic, YouTube channel, and start doing it. Do I think there'll be people that will tune into Michael Kay? Yeah, I'm not saying he wouldn't have anything. Will he do it as well as some of these other content creators out there? I'm not so sure about that, because he's taking away the skill and the value of what they do, and it's disrespectful. It's disrespectful. But some people, when things are changing, they're scared of change. They're scared to adapt, and they have to attack and put down, because now they see other people that come into space, and I'm going to keep it 100 on this one, people that sometimes don't look like them coming into the space. And that's part of the threat too, because for a lot of us as minorities, we've had to create our content to try to open up doors for ourselves, because we don't know somebody, or we didn't go to this school, and it can't just be handed to them. So when that stuff is changing and the doors are opening and fans have more of a say in a relationship like they do with me and you, it's different. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, man. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I'm just glad you brought that up, because I think that was the most disgusting part of what he says. And to call people fleas and generalize, Nah, man, it's disgusting. There's no room for that.
And I got a couple of comments from the chat here that I want to get into. There's more in here, but I did start a couple while we were going through this. D saying, until sources are named, it's all hearsay. And obviously, no one ever names sources. That's just been a thing that's been going on forever. No one's going to name their sources. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sources. But I do agree that for the most part, when you say sources, it's pretty much hearsay at that point in time. D also saying, shout out to the Metsed Up boys. It blew up. I guess they were one of the ones that kind of attacked or went after Michael Kay for this. And those guys, those guys worked hard from the beginning as content creators to a point where at a certain time, a couple years ago, they were the Mets podcast. So they were in the clubhouse at the time, and they worked hard to get where they are. It's not an easy thing, Dexter. You know this. I mean, I don't have a producer. I don't have meetings. I'm putting together all the graphics. I'm putting together all the topics for us to talk about. I'm the one going through the chat while we're having the conversation. There's no one behind the scenes doing any of that stuff. It is not an easy thing to then, take that, put it into audio form, upload that it's like a full day's process. Cut clips, have it on Instagram, have it everywhere so people can see, to have them come back to the show. This is not an easy job. You don't just come on here. And I think that's what was coming off from him. You don't just come on here, turn the camera on and just start talking.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen that way. You don't show up to do your show about 5 minutes beforehand, get a piece of paper with all the topics and just start spewing stuff. It's a process. And that's something that, gets crazy. And what gets lost in the mix here is when you say something, people tend to pick it up. And the one thing I think that bothered me, that what he said about Juan Soto, is the fact that his family is the ones that did this, that his family are the ones that got him to make the decision to come to the Mets because he wanted to come to the Yankees. And maybe it was an innocent comment. Maybe it is true. I don't know. Like, again, it is hearsay. But because he did that, and I want to bring up this screenshot here, because he did that, we get things like this. And I crossed out the name of the person, but you can see it is a Yankee content creator or a Yankee fan on X. Look at what happens here when you mention comments like this coming from someone who is well respected in the space as Michael Kay is, that now Juan Soto's mom here is going to get attacked. Mm-hmm. And why does she get attacked? If you go to the next picture, it's known fact, a quote from Michael Kay from his show saying this. So that becomes a problem when you start saying these. You better make sure that this is correct, because now his family gets attacked. And we know on X, a lot of people get attacked and a lot of fans go after each other. They go after the players. There's been death threats to players all across a sports world if they don't do well. Like, this stuff happens. You got to be careful, and you got to make sure you're right when you say things like this.
You have a responsibility when you have, I don't care what your platform is. Once you're out there publicly, I don't care if it's this podcast, I don't care if it's me with the New York Post, you have a responsibility on your platform to, I'll put it like this, not spread things that could be rumors, could be misinformation. You need to be very cautious of that. Look, I could say something and I could sit here and stand and say, well, Anthony, I don't know how person, A on Twitter X is going to respond to this. Yeah, that's true. That person has their own agency. I'm not saying that. But in this social media culture we're in, look, there's nothing. People are looking for reasons to be mad sometimes. I'm a big believer in that. People are just looking for things to be mad about, right? And I'm not saying all Yankees fans, but we've seen this for those of us, even myself as a journalist, I've seen it on Twitter. There's Yankee fans that are still mad about Juan Soto left. And I get it. I've said this. This was a big moment for the Mets. I said it when it happened. This is also a big moment for the Yankees. The Yankees have never been the place where the main star, the main player, does not choose them in free agency, especially when they had him in-house. That's not been what's happened for them. So I understand why this is shocking to the Yankees organization, to Yankee fans, and a lot. Some of them, I feel like, I get it. I understand why it's shocking. You got to get over it. You got to get over it. Like, it's happened. You're looking like a scorned lover now. That's what this all comes across to me as, like a scorned lover. And even I'll say this to the Mets fans too that are angry about Juan Soto and his play. Guys, it's been what? Almost 60 games. What are we talking about? He still has a lot that he can do to turn around the season. We've seen players get off to slow starts. Anthony, you mentioned great job by you about the players who've come to the Mets before in Flushing and have had slow starts that are Hall of Famers. We saw recent and this is the thing that gets me. We have recent evidence of this. We've seen Francisco Lindor. We saw a terrible start to the season by Aaron Judge last year in April, just right across town. And then the season turned around like this. The Mets themselves, last year, right at this time, I think it was about a year ago, Anthony, you had me on the show. And I was talking to you after the Dodgers series last year at the end of May, ironically, about, hey, this team should blow everything up. Thought they should start selling pieces. I thought they should blow it up. And boy, was I wrong. This team turned it around. Baseball's way too long to be getting mad about. The Mets are 10 games over 500, and we're not at Memorial Day yet. They are 10 games over 500. I think most Mets fans would have signed for that if I told them that. And if I told you what Juan Soto was hitting, what the team was doing with runners in scoring position, and I told you there were 10 games over 500 on May 25th, I think a lot of Mets fans would have signed for that. You got to put things in perspective, right? But back to the Juan Soto stuff. You have to be, when you're Michael Kay, I'm sorry, I'm going to say his name as is, or anybody else, you have a platform, you got to be responsible for your words. And when you are putting down other people to try to elevate yourself, that's never a good look. That's you call the ego tripping. That's exactly what it is. We have to call a thing a thing. That's exactly what it is. It is despicable. There was no room for that. Michael Kay knows better. And again, he said there was something he said that was really interesting to me in that. And I found it hilarious. And I'm glad, I think I texted you this, Anthony. He said, oh, well, like, I don't care about this. So this doesn't bother me. And I'm kind of paraquoting him here. And I'm like, clearly it does, because you're here going on a rant about it for 7 minutes. If it didn't bother you, you wouldn't go on a rant about it for 7 minutes. Like, I'll be honest and say I'm bothered by what he said, which is why I'm talking about it for this long. So for him to do that is completely disingenuous. It's terrible. And, you know, the stuff about Juan Soto and his family, you're right. This is what other people are going to do. Yankees content creator, whoever that was out there, is putting that and posting a picture of him and his mom. The other thing I don't like is we're acting like Juan Soto didn't have agency, that he couldn't make his free agency decision on his own. Yes, do I think he probably got input from friends and family? Of course, if any of us make a big life decision, if we're going to change a job, you're going to talk to your spouse, you're going to talk to family, you're going to do, of course you're going to do that. But at the end of the day, the decision came down to Juan Soto. And I don't think he made a decision where he didn't think he was going to be happy or wasn't happy. And also don't think Juan Soto is, not saying that mistake, you haven't made a decision on something and felt early on it's a mistake, but I don't think Juan Soto is somebody who's going to say, even if he's not feeling great about his start, and I agree with everything you said, Anthony. Yeah, I wouldn't be happy too if I was hitting what he was hitting with runners in scoring position, and I'm a great player and I hold myself to a very high standard, which I am absolutely 100% convinced that Juan Soto does, because he wouldn't be the player that he was if he didn't hold himself to a high standard. So who's here walking around happy when they're hitting what he's hitting with runners in scoring position? Now, do I think he's going to motivate it to turn it around? Yes. That doesn't mean he's not happy being a Met. He could just not be happy with his production. It doesn't have to be that deep. I don't want to rehash myself, but hey, look at who's saying this. Look at where it's coming from. Look at the timing, folks. I think that speaks loudly.
Yeah, and like I said, he didn't have to do anything once he signed the contract. Literally 15 minutes after he signed the contract, you see him celebrating in the pool, champagne being thrown everywhere, that he got this deal. There's no way to me that this is just, and maybe they're a part of the decision making. Maybe he's thinking about how to take care of his family when push comes to shove. We don't know how he grew up in his life. We don't know, if there was struggles or if he came from nothing. I don't know the whole background of Juan Soto, but he made the choice. At the end of the day, Juan Soto chose the Mets. Period. That's it. End of story. He chose to be a New York Met. And to go out there and act like this Major League Baseball player at 26 years old, gone through all the things he's gone through in his life, been to 2 World Series, won one in his rookie season, to think that within 2 months he has this fragile personality because he's not showing the same traits he did as a New York Yankee is ridiculous to me. And
I agree.
What they are complaining about what he's doing is what they're doing right now because they have been fragile since he signed with the Mets. I get it. You can boo him. I'm not going to say not to boo him, not to turn your back on him, whatever they did at the Subway Series. And I'm pretty sure it's going to happen throughout his career. But we're talking about a guy who spent 1 season as a hired gun to be a part of the organization. Basically led the team to the World Series because Aaron Judge was not a part of it in the postseason. He didn't get them there. He got them to the playoffs, but he was not a part of the postseason for most of it.
Mm-hmm.
Even Giancarlo Stanton had a bigger deal than Aaron Judge did. But, Juan Soto, it's just crazy to me that this has gone out of proportion as it is. And some of the comments in the chat, Carlos Ramos saying the irony of criticizing Mets content creators after you make a comments like this. Clickbait. It's comical. It is clickbait.
Right.
Even though Kay even said it, like, what do I have to gain from doing this? If you have nothing to gain, then you don't need to talk about it. It's not that deep. It's not that serious. You are the Yankee announcer, right? Like, people are going to believe what you're saying. And as I posted, I didn't post the guy's name because I don't roll like that. But he posted because of what Michael Kay said. So that becomes a problem. And as Shea Parking Lot puts it perfectly, nothing leaks from the Mets. We have not heard leaks since Steve Cohen has been owner of this team. Nothing gets out there.
That's a great point.
Nothing gets out there unless Will Salmon, you mentioned Jeff Passan, he's the national guy. He hasn't posted anything about that. Again, these are well-respected guys in the in sports.
You mentioned all the beat writers who cover the team. Look at who are all fantastic journalists. So I'm not here to just pump the people that my colleagues at the New York Post. You mentioned Laura Albanese, Will Salmon, all fantastic journalists who cover the team very well. Nothing. None of the beat reporters. I tell people all the time, there's still value in journalism. There's value in beat reporters that are around the team every day, that are plugged in with the organization. Obviously, the great columnists that I've mentioned too, the national reporters, guys who are plugged in. Sometimes we don't have to overreact to everything just because there's noise. And that's why I brought up Pete Alonso last year and the noise that was around there. And people, there's a problem in the Mets clubhouse. Look, man, when there's a problem in the clubhouse, trust me, it gets out to the right people. Because somebody wants it to be known that there's a problem in the clubhouse. If there's a problem with a player, somebody in the organization would want it to be known that it is. And I mean this with all due respect. If somebody in the organization wants it to leak and get out on any of this stuff, it is not going to radio hosts. Just want to be very clear on that. That's not how they're going to get that information out. Do teams leak stuff that they want to get? Absolutely. It happens all the time in journalism. They're not, I'm telling you, it's not going to radio hosts. Not saying that radio hosts don't ever know anything. Not saying that sometimes they don't talk to people. This is not the way they're going to leak out this information. No, it's not how it's going to go. And I think it's a great point about the Mets, how they've been tight as an organization with their information, particularly since Steve Cohen has come on and how they've run things. And I will also ask people when have we heard in the last 3 to 4 years players have not complained about the Mets organization, what it's like to work for them? You've not heard this from managers. You've not heard this from anybody. I think the Mets have done a really good job in running things the way they've run. And so I think the other thing with the Mets in the clubhouse is, if you think it's a problem or Soto's a problem, look at how Carlos Mendoza managed the team in the first year last year. I think Mendoza's a pretty good manager. I really think he can do some good stuff here in New York. And I think the thing is, he's got the pulse of the clubhouse. You read, I believe Will Salmon had a story in The Athletic. I think it was him. About the lineup change, which I know we're going to get to, Anthony, with Soto moving in the lineup, and how Mendoza talked to him about it about 2 weeks ago and approached him about it. This was during the Arizona series. And so when you have a manager like that, I'm just saying this is what the real job of a manager is. And we saw this last year with the Mets at the end of May when they were terrible. 11 games below 500 is to have the pulse of your team, know which buttons to push, know which guys to get right in the situation, inspire the faith in the guys. Look at what's happening with Brett Baty, which we're going to get into as well. This is why if you trust your manager and the management around everything, which is what I would say to the Mets fans, if you truly believe in that, then they're going to get through. This happens every season. You go through spells where teams ain't going to hit. Everybody never hits at the same time. Teams go through droughts. The Mets went through a drought. They were just 2-6 in the last week before last night, excuse me. They get a nice win. I think the Mets are a good team. I think this is a resilient bunch. I think it's a good team. I think they've won in different ways. 10 games above 500. And somehow it feels like the sky is falling. They're 10 games above 500 as we approach Memorial Day. We don't have to be mad about everything is all I'm saying.
I think what you said is perfect too. I just finished reading that article from Will Salmon of The Athletic. Yeah. It literally came out Friday. The discussion was talked about in Arizona a couple of weeks ago. Soto can be, and we're just finding about it today from one of the most well-respected beat reporters on the Mets beat right now. So like it was posted, the Mets don't really leak anything. Even last year, I think it was, Shea Parking Lot posted the meeting last year. That was in-house. And we still have no idea what happened. That literally happened that same day that we had our conversation about the Mets breaking things up here.
Yep.
That's
a good point too. And here's the thing. I'm not saying that Shea is saying this, Shea Parking Lot saying this. We don't have to know what happened inside, right? And I think it was right that the Mets kept that sort of in-house. We know that there was a meeting, and it's fine. This is a team. I think this is the difference in the Mets I've seen. If you're a Mets fan, going back as long as you've been watching the Mets, Anthony and I've been watching, this is as how do I put this in the right way? This is professional as I think we've seen this organization run, in terms of a consistency, in terms of an accountability, in terms of player management, development. I think this is as professional as Mets fans have seen. And I think that's what was very attractive to Juan Soto to come and play here. And so, that's a great point about Will Salmon's reporting on that. I don't know if Will had the information of the meeting on the flight that happened a couple of weeks ago. Maybe he did. And he was like, okay. And then he wrote the story after there was the actual lineup change this week that we saw on Wednesday. So then he writes a story, which makes perfect sense. And another thing I'd also like to add for something like that, just want to be very clear, especially around, I know it happens at places like where I work, New York Times, Will Salmon there with The Athletic and the Times. You're not writing stuff like that or saying that unless you've got it from at least two sources. Good journalism is very strict on you're not putting your name next to something, reporting something, unless you've got multiple sources to verify this. So as good as a journalist as Will Salmon is and others are around the team, they're not even writing a story like that until they have something. So that, again, that's my point. They're held to that journalistic standard, but that's the thing when anybody can say anything because they're not held to a journalistic standard. And that's the point I'm trying to make to fans out here, which is watch who's saying it, who's writing it, who's posting it, and when it's coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to put the nail in the coffin on this. Like I said, I was going to do it 40 minutes ago, and we're 40 minutes in. We're only been talking about
It's a good discussion, though, man.
It is a very good discussion. I want to get to some of the comments. Rosie K saying, thanks, Dexter, for speaking so openly and eloquently about this topic. Duran Rivera saying, K coming off as arrogant, calling himself a lion. YouTube user saying, this was disgusting to bring someone's mom into this, as I showed those posts there. Rosie K also saying K is upset because Soto left and he doesn't like being called out on being a Yankee homer. He's being biased here. Also saying Soto is not used to being on the other side of a media storm where the press openly roots for the Mets to fail because they're Yankee homers, and we get to see a lot of that. This last one that I'm going to say because Duran Rivera posted this. Kay also said that in the future these content creators would wind up getting a job bagging groceries or something to that effect. Look, I may not get to the top of the heat, but I will say this: I've worked very hard at this. You've seen my work. I'm very grateful that we have built a bond and a friendship, that you have me on New York Post when Met games and Met series end, because you respect my content. If I
Absolutely.
only have 1,000 people in here that watch my stuff, that respect the work that I do, and I have good relationships with the writers. I'm not in the clubhouse. I'll be that. I'm a fan. This is a fan content created thing right now. And if that's the only thing I come up with in my life and in my career, then I've done my job, and I'm happy about that. So it is what it is with the way the ego works here. But and this, to me, I'm not here to fight for minutes, to fight over other content creators. We even talked off air, hey, how about we get someone else on? Like, I respect all the Mets content creators that are out there. They've been on this show. I have good friendships with a lot of them, and I root for them. So I'm not going to be that type of guy that's going to throw even Yankee content creators I know. I don't throw them under the bus because it's Mets Yankees thing. I work with them too. We work with Hector. Hector's a big time
Hector,
Yankee
our
fan.
guy. Shout out to Hector. Yeah.
Hector. Yeah. It sucks that someone of that stature would put people down, but at the end of the day, that's something that he's going to have to deal with on his own, and maybe he just blows it off. But it's a very ego-driven type of move from his part, and that's where I want to leave it on that.
That's a great, well said, Anthony. And you will continue to do great stuff. And last thing I'll say is why I love Anthony's work and some of the other content creators, because of what Anthony just said. I can see the people who do this because they love it. You love it. And that's the thing. You're not doing it for views. You're doing it to engage with your community as you are here. And that's beautiful. When you do that with your work, it shines through. That's all I'll say.
And like D says, what's wrong with working at a grocery store? What is wrong with it? I mean,
right. I'm not shaming anybody for that.
Yep.
That's terrible. I'm not shaming anybody who works hard, I respect everybody who does any line of work. I always approach life like that, and I always will.
We talked about the Juan Soto and basically there's not been as much of a Soto shuffle. We saw a little bit on the Friday night, but there's been a lineup shuffle here.
Yeah.
And they moved him to third, which is where I originally wanted him to be when he came to the Mets. Obviously, he went to bat second with the Yankees, and to have Aaron Judge hit behind him. But I initially wanted Juan Soto batting third in this lineup, especially after what we saw last season from Mark Vientos in the 2-hole. You can start off with Lindor, Vientos batting number 2, and I sandwich him behind Soto, and this guy's going to get some good pitches, and then Alonso fourth. So he, Soto batting third for the last couple of games. Like we mentioned, we talked about him and Mendy having the meeting back in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, and Mendy, credit to Carlos Mendoza for not, I guess, rushing into it in a time when this team was really struggling. He wanted to gauge his thoughts on it at first. What do you think about if I moved you to third? And look, Soto said, and I quoted from the article from Will Salmon, whenever you want to do it, let's do it. I don't mind hitting second or third. I feel comfortable in any spot. And he actually prefers hitting third. He was upset in Washington when Davey Martinez moved him to second in the order. He's career batting second. He's got 77 home runs and an 881 OPS. Batting third, he has 73 homers, but a 983 OPS, and that's in less plate appearances. Let me say
there you go.
3 times fast. But look, you put him third. I know Starling Marte's been batting second currently with Mark Vientos dealing with an issue. He was supposed to do it Friday, but he was a late scratch into the game. And like I said, my ideal top 4 would have been Lindor, Vientos, Soto, and Alonso to start the season. What is your thoughts on this whole situation with moving him in the order? What does your ideal lineup look like?
So it's funny because you and I have very similar thoughts of what I wanted for the top 4. I wanted that Lindor. I wanted Vientos second. I thought he was primed to hit there. Soto third, Alonso fourth. So we're on the same page with that. I think that, people have been calling for this for weeks. I like that Mendoza took his time with this because I like, sometimes with a small sample size, you don't want to be overreactionary. You want to get more information. I think it also speaks volumes that Soto, this is where I go to unhappiness. Mendoza approached Soto about this on a flight. They talk about it. Soto says, Okay. Yeah, I'm willing to do whatever you need to do for the team.
Yeah.
That
And
sounds
before you
yeah.
continue going, this won't be blasted everywhere on radio, social. They won't talk about the part where Soto is being a team player and, oh, all right, I'll move to third. Actually, I prefer being at third. Like that will not be talked about at all in the next couple of weeks.
I love that you said that, because this, and I know this is going to bring it back to the K stuff. I'm not going to mention his name anymore, but what I am going to say to what Anthony just said there, to the beautiful viewers and listeners, this is why we're in a beautiful time. Sure, you can say there are things sometimes toxic about social media, but the beauty of content creation, the beauty of digital platforms is that you can get a diverse array of what you want to hear or talk about your team or whatever. And Anthony is 100% right. Saying that Juan Soto is a team player, and when he had this meeting, is not gonna. It's not the same headline, right? It doesn't get it like, oh, Juan Soto doesn't be here. I get all that. As somebody who works in media, I understand that. But I do think it's important for us in whatever we do around media, and I try to do this with the shows I do and everything, is like you have to talk about things with nuance, right? So the fact that we're mentioning it up here, and that's all I ask is, for journalism content creators, is let's talk with nuance here. And Juan Soto saying that as the highest paid player on his team, highest paid contract in baseball history, in Mets history, that says, hey, coach, I'm willing to do whatever you want to do. Isn't that what we want from our leaders? Isn't that what we want from athletes? Isn't that leadership? But it's disingenuous, and it's not good for any of us if we just gloss over that and don't talk about it. And we're talking about it here. And this is what the point I just want to make is why it's important to have people like Anthony and myself to talk about this, not just to tout us, and others as well too. But I think it's really important that Juan Soto did that, especially around this, I'll call it a firestorm that is around him at this time. I think that's really important that this was eased. Yes, he does prefer, as Anthony just mentioned, to be hitting third, and the numbers do back that up, that he's been better hitting in the third spot in his career. But I think he'll be comfortable. I think he'll be fine. Now, look, if he, this change was made Wednesday. I was actually in Boston at the game on Tuesday. If he, hits, comes up big like he did last night, I think it could be a big moment for him. We'll see how that continues. I think it's good. I also think Juan Soto has, and data proves this too, he's had some bad luck, like just some hard luck. Yeah. He's in the top 5% in hard hit balls and exit velo. So, but he's still struggling the way he is with runners in scoring position. Some of that is just bad luck. He's just too talented of a player, too good of a hitter to not come around. I really mean this when I say this. Juan Soto is the least of my worries with the New York Mets. The least of the worries. And so I like this change. I like this change. I like that Mendoza took his time with it. I like that he got more information. I like that he decided to make the change. And, we'll see. We'll see how it pays off. Sometimes lineup changes work, shuffling things around. Sometimes it doesn't. We'll see. I mean, we have a small sample size. So far, so good. Big hit last night on Saturday against the Dodgers. We'll see how it is going forward.
And we saw last year that Carlos Mendoza is not hesitant to move these guys around in the lineup. As I mentioned with Mark Vientos, he was batting fifth. He was batting sixth. Mm-hmm. They moved him to second, and him and Lindor were a 1-2 punch. Yep. They had to move Nimmo around, and they tried moving Alonso around to get him going. And it just, sometimes it happens. Sometimes it doesn't work. And, to Soto's, point here, he's not the only one that's not hitting with runners in scoring position. It is a team epidemic we're going through right now, where this team is not hitting with runners in scoring position. And Ken Thal, mentioning you can fire, Chavez. I honestly don't know why there's two hitting coaches on this team. I don't know if every other team has this, but this is the first time, in my lifetime that the Mets have had two hitting coaches, him and Jeremy Barnes. And, you can fire them. But at the same time, like, okay, if you bring in another hitting coach and they don't do well, now what do you do? Like what? How do you fix the issue now? You have these professional hitters in Lindor and Soto, and I don't know how much they listen to a hitting coach, and I don't know really how much of an impact the hitting coach has now, outside of showing them data on other pitchers, how to approach the at bat, and then the hitters, I guess, do whatever they want after that point, right? Like, I mean, like, I just don't know how much of a change that something like this has happened. Like, for every problem that we've had with Juan Soto now not, taking off to what we deem to be how he should be hitting, like how he hit with the Yankees. You had Alonso in the first month batting over 350. You have Brett Baty right now, who's hot. Does Chavez and Barnes get credit for the turnaround for Brett Baty? Or those are the questions. And I'm not saying that I disagree with Ken here, because I'm not the biggest fan of Eric Chavez, over the last couple of years. But you have to sit back. You have to think of everything that has gone around with the team and be like, if we make this move and it doesn't work, what next?
Yeah, a lot you said there too to me is I always, that was funny. I was talking to my cousin about this, a big Mets fan, the other day. I never feel like firing the hitting coach is always a knee-jerk reaction, but there actually isn't a lot of data that proves that firing the hitting coach then necessarily improves the offense, right? Like but it's a thing. I know people are like, hey, we got to blame somebody. Haven't been in love also with the fact the Mets have 2 hitting coaches. That feels a little bit weird. I wonder if there's sometimes too many voices in the room on that, too many cooks in the kitchen. You know what I mean? Like, I worry about that part of it. But yeah, I think that's the thing with hitting coaches. It's great. When, Lindor's had a better start to the season than we've seen him have in recent years. Some of that might be his comfortability with the organization now. Pete Alonso got off to a great start this year. How much of that is Pete? How much of that is the hitting coach? Like you said, Brett Baty. Vientos has been a little up and down. He had a tear a couple of weeks ago where he was really hot. Is that the hitting coach? Is the hitting coach now just forgot how to be a hitting coach? Can the hitting coach fix Juan Soto's bad luck in terms of hard hit balls? I don't really think so. That also sounds like I'm taking a crap on the hitting coaches, because I'm not. I think there is value in there. I just don't know if the value is that instrumental in turning around a team. Teams are going to have bad slumps. What I also will say is, look, I think sometimes in baseball, a sport where you're very successful when you fail 70% of the time, it's everybody wants everybody to be hot at the same time. That's never going to happen. It never happens in any season. What you want is, what I always look at sports is this for regular season. Can you get your teams to learn how to win in a variety of situations as much as possible so they're ready by the postseason? Right? You got to learn how to win the low-scoring one-run games.
Yeah.
You got to learn how to blow a team out. You got to learn how to come from behind. You got to learn all these different situations, because you
got to win with small ball and situational hitting.
Right.
You hit with the homers. It's so much involved.
You learn all this through the course of a season. And I think fans, particularly I'm just talking to Mets fans here, just look at last season, man. And Anthony, you're right with the lineup shuffle. Just with Mendoza, I think one of the things that impressed me the most about him last year was accountability. The guy didn't have it, wasn't having it. And somebody else, all right, I'm going to play you. Next man person up. Same thing in the bullpen. I loved how he managed the team with that. And I love that he's willing to try new things. He's willing to hold guys accountable. He's willing to go who's hot. He's willing to give people a shot. Brett Baty's instilled confidence. And Brett Baty's now hitting at the plate with a lot of confidence. Brett Baty's going to go through another slump again this season. It's going to happen, right? There's going to be a point where he goes 5 for 40 or something, and it's going to happen. But
it's adjustments.
Adjustments and the confidence. This period of time for him right now could be huge. This could be also huge for just the lineup change for Soto, for the rest of the guys. You bring up a great point. It's not just Soto. It's also the rest of the team not hitting runners in scoring position. But, yeah, no, I like the move. I don't think we have to jump the gun to saying you have to fire the hitting coach yet. I still think it's way too small of a sample size. If the struggles get to mid to late June, I'm saying basically another 3 to 4 weeks, you want to talk about it then, I'd then entertain that conversation a little bit more. But I think right now this was a good change, and we'll see how the Mets move on from here.
Yeah, G Money Stacks in the chat saying, who are you going to replace them with in the future? D saying, how about Carlos Beltran, which is a guy that, immediately comes to my mind when it comes to hitting. But you just never know, because if it doesn't work out with Carlos Beltran, now you saddled with Carlos Beltran, and we go into another year, if this team's not hitting, are we talking the same conversation again of it needing to be changed? My guy Hector Blunt Thought Sports saying what people forget is that Chavez hasn't been completely in charge all this time. He went to be the bench coach for a year and admitted that it took time to adjust back to being a hitting coach again.
That's a good point. You have to adjust in different roles. And there is some adjustment in that too. Look, none of us are going to know how good of a hitting coach or poor of a hitting coach or a mediocre of a hitting coach, Chavez might be. I'm sure he's doing his best. I'm sure the players like him. I think that's important too. These guys you have to have relationships with. Look, if hitting coaches if there was like some amazing hitting coach out there and everybody was hitting 300, that guy would make so much money. It's not, or woman would make so much money. Yep. It's not even funny, but that doesn't happen because just the nature of baseball. It is hard to hit a baseball. It is hard to hit a baseball at the major league level where guys are actively trying to get you out with all kinds of pitches. There are adjustments. There are guys who hit better in cold weather. There are guys who hit better indoors. There are guys who hit better outdoors. There's so many factors in it. You have to ride the ebbs and flows of the season. I'd really just pitch patience. I think, again, I'll say this. You're a Mets fan. I think you should be encouraged with how the team is not encouraged with how the team is hitting runners in scoring position, but you should be encouraged by the fact that the team is 10 games over 500 with how they've hit with runners in scoring position, with how the pitching is very likely overperformed expectations. Anthony came on with me and we talked about it at the beginning of the season and how the concern was around the Mets pitching, less concern for the offense. And I think most reasonable people watching this team would have agreed with you on that. Pitching has been really good. The pitching has started giving length this month, which they were not in April. So now I feel like you got to feel like the hitting's going to come around, and maybe this lineup changes all that, but we'll see. Baseball's so long, man. Time will tell. We'll know.
Yeah. It's not a football season. We got a long way to go, and the main goal is to be at your hottest when the wrapping up and getting towards a postseason run here. That's when you want to get that. And that's what happened to the Mets last year. They got hottest in September and October, and it took them all the way to the NLCS. So, we'll see how the Mets, come through the next couple of weeks, the next couple of days. They've been really good against teams over 500. That's one of the positives to me. They have a great home record, and they've been one of the better teams against teams over 500, and that's an important part to me, because who are you beating? Are you beating these? If you beat teams over 500 and that are playing well, I think that goes a long way there. So we'll see where the Mets go from there. Jason Custodio says Baty should be the everyday third baseman. I think everyone can agree on that, and I'm glad he brought that up, because that's what we are talking about next. Brett Baty, everyday third baseman. Look, Mark Vientos, I did not see a regression of this magnitude at third base for Mark Vientos. I thought he was comparable at third base last year. I thought he did a good job. I don't know if a lot of that got masked because he was hitting so well and you didn't want to upset that whole portion right there, so you leave him at third base. But I thought he played a pretty decent third base last year, and to start the season, last couple of weeks, I don't know if because of the frustrations he's had at the plate, if that then translated to him playing so poorly defensively. But you have Brett Baty, who started off the year, as he starts off every year, struggling. Send him down to AAA. Obviously, he bashes in AAA. Bring him back up. And now we're seeing this defensive portion. And he, I think, even said, I don't know if I heard it on whichever broadcast it was, or if I read it in one of the articles, that him playing second base helped him to play better third base. So if he is the guy now at third base, you have Mark Vientos DHing more times than not, because honestly, no offense to Starling Marte, he's a shell of himself, unfortunately. And I like Starling Marte. It's not going to work out in the long run for him being the DH every day. If he could get Mark Vientos to be that guy, and if he could drive and hit for more power in the coming weeks, I think he'll end up being that guy leading the charge there. But Baty's played great defense, and really the only guy that is really delivering some clutch hits especially with runners in scoring position. You talk about the top of the lineup not delivering. You got Brett Baty, Tyrone Taylor, and Luis Torrens are your three best batters over the past 2 weeks. It's crazy to see. And do you feel that Brett Baty has finally turned the corner for good here?
I hope so. Because I think for the Mets, this happening right now, Anthony, was the best thing that could have happened for them. They needed Brett Baty to hit because we knew we could field the position. I too, like you, have been a little shocked at the regression from Vientos. I thought he played average third base last year, which I was like, oh, he's competent. Like, he could hold it down there at third base, but I still always felt like, I wonder if the best position for him is DH. And if it'd be also best for the Mets, their lineup, just hitting on another guy coming out the farm system if Baty could hit, because he's obviously the better defensive third baseman, and we've seen it. He's made some really good plays. He even made a couple good plays when I was in Boston watching the game. Really, really good plays out in the field. I think that he knew the opportunity. I almost hate to say it. He went down obviously earlier this season and came back up. I was thinking, I said to somebody I was talking to about this, I said, yo, man, this is it for Baty, man. This might be it. This might be this moment. This is his chance. You got to give him credit that he sees the opportunity. He showed some good things right before he had went down the last time to Syracuse. So, and then he came back up and you could just see he looks more comfortable. He's having really quality at bats. Because that's the one thing I think people get a lot of times into, oh, he's hitting better and he's driving in runs as he did. And you're right, he's been one of the three best hitters in the lineup in the last 2 weeks. But it's the overall quality at bats. He's not swinging at bad pitches. He's working the count really well. And I like that. Even when he gets behind in the count, he hasn't looked overmatched or overwhelmed. So yeah, I think right now, though, if we're talking right now, today, yes, I think he has to be an everyday third base, particularly because of what you also mentioned about what the Mets are or are not getting out of the DH position with Starling Marte, who loves Starling Marte, but look, he's just had a lot of injuries, bad wheels right now, and I just think Marte is a shell of himself and is now probably a fourth, fifth outfielder on a good team. Vientos in the DH spot, I think it'd be great for the Mets. It makes their lineup better. They can go back to still having flexibility at second base, deciding what they want to do there with Acuna and McNeil. But I think it's also important for the Mets to hit on another young player coming out of the farm system in their lineup that can help produce for this team. And this is what the expectation was for Baty 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
So now to have him do that, I just think it's huge for the Mets. I think you got to play him every day at third base right now just because of what he's doing defensively, Anthony, and then also obviously what he's doing offensively. But I think also if he just gets the job, that's going to maybe relax him overall and maybe can do wonders for his confidence going forward. The same for Vientos. I don't think this is a bad thing where I worry about Vientos, whereas if he gets moved to DH, I don't think he's going to be like, man, him and Baty came up together. They're pretty close as far as reporting has gone on that. I think he's going to be happy for Baty to be here. I think he'll be okay at DH. Vientos has to look at it as, look, I get an opportunity to get 4 bats as every DH in the major leagues, maybe extend my career even more and be the best DH you can be. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing for the Mets. I think Baty should be the everyday third baseman going forward. I know it's a small sample size, so I think people are going to want to see a little bit more. But I think I'm at the point where he gives you the best defense at the position, and the way he's hitting now, some of the best offense at the position, and it'll make your lineup better. So why not go with Baty as everyday third baseman?
I just love how Baty has now come up here. He went down kind of on a hot streak. They sent him down, on a hot streak. And he comes back up and he's continuing where he left off, which I think is huge for him. It's the same recipe, maybe deja vu of what we saw when Mark Vientos got sent down after hitting that game-winning home run against St. Louis last year. They sent him down, they bring him back up, and he was off to the races, firing on all cylinders. I love that Baty has been hitting to all parts of the park. He's hitting with power. He's hitting extra base hits, something that this Mets team needs, especially when they're struggling with runners in scoring position. And I think I don't know if I put the stat here. Oh, let's see. I did not. So that one's on me, but he does hit pretty well with runners in scoring position, which is great considering the way the rest of the team has been struggling. So you want to see if you get guys on base, Baty hitting extra base hits, huge for the team, hitting with power, which we thought that, he kind of lacked the last couple of years. And then when it comes to Mark Vientos, it's hard for me to just, I know that a lot of people just want to give up on the guy so quickly. And I think we even talked about it in the offseason, watch out for Mark Vientos. It's possible that there could be a sophomore slump. This is his second full season.
Yeah.
It's possible. And he went through it. And the thing that's encouraging to me is, everyone talked, maybe we should send Vientos down. And I said, look at the underlying stats. The last couple of weeks, he's hitting over 300. The power will get there. Let him get comfortable. Let him get confident again. And if he can be that DH and start hitting, I know he's been out the last couple of days, but he did come back on Saturday. He got hit by a pitch, but it was nice to see him, a day after being out to come back after not feeling well. But if he can get going, you have Baty, the two kids on the team. You get Soto going. Lindor and Alonso will get out of their slump eventually. We've seen it. They have the resume. That's the part about the stars that I tend to leave them aside and not get too crazy and worry about them, is they have the resume to come out of this. And I think that with, Vientos and Baty being able to at some point, come through, that this lineup will be a little bit more balanced as the season wears on, if they can, overcome some of the struggles they've had with runners in scoring position. They're like a couple of base hits away from winning these games, and the pitching has kept them in throughout the entire season. My biggest concern was if these guys can go long enough to not tire out the bullpen. We've seen Edwin Diaz. I posted it last night, has been probably as elite as he's been in 2022. He's 10 for 10 in saves. I know he struggled a little bit in the beginning, but he gets the outs that are needed. And now it feels like 2022 Edwin Diaz out there, where he's dominating these at bats here against some of the biggest. Mookie Betts, he got striking out. Freddie Freeman, he got out. So these are big at bats against this Dodgers team that he's taking care of. And on Saturday, the whole thing with David Peterson, I said, we desperately need a huge performance from David Peterson. And he delivered, getting into the eighth inning. I mean, I don't think we've seen a pitcher get into the eighth inning since Luis Severino pitched a complete game shutout. And that was the first complete game shutout since Jacob deGrom in 2021. So pitching has changed in such a way where you're only seeing 5-6 innings in here. But Peterson was dealing, and it was great to see him get in there to the eighth. But this whole there's so much elements in this team doing well. I think a great thing also with the Mets is that these losses, they're close games. So they're not out of it. They're not getting bludgeoned by teams. They're not getting destroyed like Colorado has been, although they did beat the Yankees the other night, which was surprising. They're not getting killed by these teams. So it's great to see them in each and every game.
Yeah, the team has a lot of fight. I think that should also be, they're in the games, even when they haven't hit. They couldn't get a hit the other night when I was in Boston. They fall 2-0. I think that's a great point, because that's what has me optimistic about this Mets team, is that they're around. I know they lost the divisional lead. They're now 3 games back of the Phillies, heading into tonight's game against the Dodgers. But I think they're in a great spot.
By the way, the Phillies went on a hot streak.
Yep.
That's why they're 3 games back.
Right. And while the Mets were slumping, who was slumping too? Like some point earlier this week, the Dodgers had lost 8 or 9 games. They had gone through their slump as well too. These things happen in the season. Now the Mets have a chance to get a big series win this weekend against the Dodgers. They could take 2 out of 3. This is what you want from your team. I know Friday night was disappointing, because you probably feel like the Mets come back. They couldn't get the hits with runners in scoring position. They amazingly could not score in extras. But you can say the same for the Dodgers on that side too, till they finally broke through with the Teoscar Hernandez hit. Look, you're going to have this stuff. You want to see teams bounce back. I think last night's an important win. They bounced back. I think that's huge. And now they have a chance to win the series. I think this Mets team will be fine. I'm not at a point where I'm worried. You'd much rather, like you said, Anthony, you'd much rather this slumping if you want to call it that, or struggling for runners in scoring position. You much rather it happen in May than it would in August or September. Mets fans, you've seen terrible Septembers. I don't got to remind you about 2007 and 2008. You don't want to see any of that. So you rather have it happen now than then. And, I think they'll be fine. There's too many talented hitters on this team. Like you said, you trust the vets and the all-stars. You don't even worry. Those guys will come around. I think it's some of the younger guys that don't have as much on the back of their baseball card. Vientos, Baty, how do they adjust? Alvarez, I'm sneakily getting a little worried about.
Yeah.
Alvarez, I'm a little worried about. Now I want to be fair because he started the season on the injured list, and you want to see. Sometimes it takes guys a little bit more time to get back from that. So, but he's a guy I think that's really, really going to watch in the next month with the Mets. Is he turning around? He sort of hasn't been the hitter that I think a lot of people thought he would be. He obviously does a great job with the staff and catching these games, and has been a good catcher. But you like a little bit more from him hitting-wise, consistency. I think it's a big time for him. I thought this year was a big year for him, period. And obviously he gets off to a slow start with the injury, but he's a guy who I think you'll start hearing things about if he doesn't start turning it around in this next month or so. But listen, all these guys, Anthony, are young with the Mets. Baty, Vientos. Vientos, like you said, second full season. The league is adjusted to him. Now he's got to adjust back to the league. Same with Alvarez to some degree. Those are things these players have to navigate to as they grow. You're mixing these young players growing with these vets and all-stars. And that's the thing in a team that you have to watch through as the season goes through. And this is why you have to give things time, because these guys aren't Lindor and Alonso and Soto, the guys you can really trust there. Some of the younger guys is going to take some time. Even Acuna, I see how he's working through, and I like him as a player a lot. He's working through things. So, you got to give these guys, these young players, time to adjust with the vets, and there's good leadership in that Mets clubhouse. And, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah. When it comes to Alvarez, I agree with you too. There is a little bit of concern for me, considering that this was the number one top prospect in all of baseball around 2022, 2023-ish. And the struggles that he's having, I don't really know. Some of it is approach, right? He's trying to look for the home run. He's trying to hit for power. To the people who at the beginning of his career, we might have the next Mike Piazza on our hand. Like as soon as you hear that, you have to be like, pause for a second, please, please pause on that talk. We're talking about a Hall of Fame bat, but the power was there. We saw it for most of 2023. The problem is this guy got hit on his hand, not once, twice, same hand. And this is a hand that he catches with as well. So that when you're talking about that and the toll that it takes on the body and the hand, it's got to affect him hitting at some point, to the point where even Carlos Ramos is saying, he is ready to have Torrens be the everyday catcher. Wow. Look, I don't know if I'm ready for him to be the everyday catcher. Maybe we ease into that and make it be a 50-50 type split right now until Alvarez can get himself going. And if he doesn't get himself going, obviously Torrens is up to the challenge to do it. I just don't know if he can be that everyday catcher. We saw him last year be the everyday catcher for a while, and then even he went through his own type of slump towards the end of the season and into the postseason. So I know it's the quick thing to do is to say, you know what, let's give it to Torrens. I don't know. And even as G Money Stacks says, he's not himself, Alvarez. The power after getting hit by the pitch in the left hand, I think that's been the biggest problem. Like maybe he's not the power guy. Maybe he's more of a Yadi or Molina type where he'll get some big hits here and there, but his approach has to be better. Looking for home runs all the time is not going to be the way to stay in the major leagues and stay in Queens.
I love what you said there. It's the approach with him. Listen, I also still have to be like, man, I know last year was his first full season catching. This is year number 2. I do think your points about the injuries are spot on. In fact, he got hit in the left hand twice. Look, his approach has to be better, and he's got to figure that out. That's I think the thing that's be better. Maybe it's you make another good point. Maybe sometimes we, fans, media, we have to adjust the expectations. I think a lot of people thought he was a 30 home run guy. And I'm not saying he can't still be. This is still way too early. But maybe he's not. You said maybe he's a Yadier Molina type. Maybe he's a 250, 260 guy who gets you some big hits. Listen, if he's Yadier Molina and has a good defensive game and the pitching staff loves, if he's Yadier Molina or anything yet like that, you will sign for that. That is a fine catcher to have in your lineup.
Yeah.
You know, would you like it if he was Piazza? Yes, but I'm going to the high end, like you said.
They even did it with Alvarez and Vientos. I mean, not Alvarez, Baty and Vientos. Yeah. Oh, this could be the next David Wright. Like,
you don't have to do that.
We're talking generational type players.
Yeah. You gotta pump the brakes on that sometimes and let these guys be, because when Wright came, I remember this one, Wright and Reyes came up, you know, you didn't know what they could be like. You had no idea. You got to let these guys be their own thing. This is what I say all the time. When you bring in prospects, you don't know how this stuff is going to go. You hope that we're talking about Baty, we're talking about Vientos, we're talking about Alvarez. Those are three guys that have come for the Mets, pretty highly touted. Some have had success. None have had success in the way we thought they would. I think everybody wants players to come up and hit like Michael Conforto did in 2015, right? And it doesn't always work like that. And then Michael Conforto did not have that long of a career with the Mets. So it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes the route is like Vientos last year. Sometimes it's like what we're seeing with Baty this year. We don't know what it's going to be for Alvarez. I just think when you're bringing up these guys, look, you bring up three guys. If you hit on two of them, if one of them becomes a all-star, the other becomes a average major league player, or at least an everyday major league player, it's that you're not going to hit on all of them. Then it's never going. That never happens. You're never going to hit on all of them. What you hope is you can develop right. You can instill confidence. Can you get a couple of major league players out of it? That's the goal. Can you get a couple of major league players that if one becomes a superstar, oh, you're golden.
Yeah.
If you get a multiple time all-star, that's even great. But that stuff is hard, man. Like we've seen it with Mets pitching. We've seen that before. I mean, look at the recent run, right? We've seen it with Mets pitching before. You got DeGrom, who's an all-time great Mets pitcher, who most people didn't even think was going to be the best of that bunch. So you never know how development works. Development is very interesting. It's about the guys putting in the work. It's about focus. It's about being in the right situations, about the lineup around them. And sometimes just recognizing, like you make a great point, Anthony, sometimes just recognizing when you have to adjust expectations and what these guys are. Alvarez, I think it's a big year for him still. I'm still not backing off that point. We still will have to see what he is and what he is in time. Maybe he is a Yadier Molina. And again, there's great value in that. A lot of teams would sign. If I told you Alvarez coming out would be Yadier Molina, you're like, man, that's a good everyday catcher. He's going to be clutch for my team. He's going to be a good leader. You'd sign for that in a heartbeat. So we'll see how it all plays.
As Deep posts, statistically, very few players break through to the majors, which is true.
That's a great point.
For every Darryl Strawberry, David Wright, and Jose Reyes, we get a Greg Jeffries and Michael Conforto, and then we get a Fernando Martinez Lastings Milledge. There's very
you took it back, Anthony.
Yeah, they're very varying type of players that we have here. And it sucks to have to put all these pressure on these players, especially, you know, when you have a team full of stars that need to really step up their game and the focus needs to be on them. You can't be asking, and that's what they kind of did in 2022 when they brought them up at certain points in the time, is you can't have these kids come up to be the saviors. You can't. You have to. They have to be ingrained into the team and be able to produce. And that's what we got from Vientos last year. That's what we're getting from Baty now. That's what we got from Alvy in 2023 before he got hurt. So we'll see what happens. And this is a segue that leads into, you know, the last topic of the show. I know we're a little bit, you know, shorter on time here, but Ronny Mauricio, you know, return being eminent. Will Salmon of The Athletic put the timetable. I don't know if you've read his article, but timetable for return remains a deliberate process, maybe longer than a matter of weeks, because he's coming back from that knee surgery in 2023, and it's been a slow process for him to get back. But since going to AAA Syracuse, you know, talk about runners in scoring position, he's been doing well, 357, a home run, 6 RBIs. You know, if you send down a guy like Acuna, you're kind of, losing that speed guy that we have there in the line, because that's what he's been providing best, defense and speed to me when it comes to Acuna. But when it comes to Mauricio, he's yet to play 9 innings in back-to-back games. So it's going to be a while till we see him. And with Syracuse, he's been playing DH, second base, third base. But, they also thought about maybe he plays a little bit of outfield. So I don't know what your thoughts are on Mauricio. I think it's fine, taking your time and bringing him back. But do you see at some point, do you feel like we may see him this season?
I think if he continues to hit down there in AAA, I think you could. But I think they're going to be cautious because of what you just said. I think you're going to want to see him play back-to-back 9-inning games. You want to see what the wear and tear is with the knee. You really need to see that before you rush him up. You also, to the point you just made it when we were talking about Alvarez, you don't want to bring it up in a situation. I don't think it's going to be necessarily the case with this Mets lineup, Anthony, but where he feels like he has to produce. I like Acuna. I think he's got some things to work on at the plate, but I like his speed, and I'm kind of a sucker for a speed guy on the team. I like having a guy there. I always want to see somebody who's got a chance late games to steal bases for you, even in that role, to play good defense. So I like that. I like Acuna's role in the team, and I think he's fine to be in his role and just flourish in that as he develops more as a player. Mauricio, I don't think there's an immediate need to bring him up now. I think if Baty had struggled, then we might be having a different conversation about bringing him up sooner. But if Baty continues to play well defensively and offensively, I don't think there's any need to rush Mauricio up. Look, this is a good problem to have if he continues to hit, though. If he continues to hit and he was projected to be a good hitter for average, then you talk about it. But I think it's way too early. I think he needs to get more reps down in Syracuse. I think he needs to, make sure that he can play back-to-back games, dealing with travel, all this stuff, the rest, his recovery. I think the Mets are going to play this very cautiously. I think if there's an injury mid-season, now we're getting into like July-ish, and he can come up, I think that would happen. But I don't think the Mets are going to rush this, and I think it's the right move to not rush this, and also not just say, okay, we're going to give up on Acuna because, his hitting has cooled off since the start of the season. I think let him thrive in the role that he's in. And I get it. We're always looking for what's next, Anthony. We're always looking for what's next.
Yep.
Who's gonna come? Who's a guy who can add? And I forget. I think it was D in the chat who said, a lot of major leaguers come up and they more fail than they are hits with the team. And it's a great point. Not saying that Mauricio is going to be a failure or not. I just think it's not his time right now, and I don't think the Mets have to rush it because of what's happened with Baty. Now, if they were having more issues at third, then I'd feel differently, and I might say, all right, time to give the kid a look. But right now, I think for Mauricio's development, it's best to do it, and maybe you're able to get him some more time in the outfield, and there's a situation where he could come up and be ready to play the outfield, which is the area the Mets could have a little more versatility. So, just give him. Get him right now for Mauricio. Stay healthy, get more bats. That's kind of it for me. Stay healthy, get more bats.
Yeah, I agree. I think if Baty, if Vientos, if they were really struggling, Acuna to a certain extent as well, if they weren't at least somewhat providing some of the production that they have been, I think it would be a different story, and maybe there'd be more of a rush to bring him up here. But like, as we saw, they brought up Jared Young to play the infield. They'll have someone down in AAA that they'll bring up here to help out. They got Joey Meneses down there. I don't think they're going to rush Ronny Mauricio here. I think, what was it? Carlos Ramos saying, I love his speed and defense, Dexter, but his at-bats are worrying me. And this is in terms of Acuna. Is the speed enough to keep him up and the roster spot? That's where his concern is.
That's fair. I would say this. He hasn't had good at bats. He's been sometimes swinging wildly, sometimes very early in the count. That's been a little bit concerning to me. Do I think there's value sometimes in sending guys down and work on stuff? Yeah, I do. Sometimes there's also value in keeping them up and letting them work through it. I think because of his role on the team right now with the emergence, I'm talking about Acuna right now with the emergence of Baty, he's not hurting them. I think enough where I'm like, okay, you got to send them down. Maybe Don't quote me on this. Maybe in a couple weeks, Carlos, I might look at this and feel the way you are, and like, yo, he's got to go down because the at-bats are so concerning. I'm not quite there yet, but that could change. Now, if in a couple of weeks, Mauricio, I'm talking like 3 weeks from now, Mauricio has played some more games. He's still hitting well. He's played back-to-back 9-inning games, and you say you want to give a different look. Okay. I'm fine with that. I'm just gonna let Acuna work through some things a little bit more. I do, if as long as it's not hurting the team, is what I'm gonna say. As long as now I like Acuna down in the 9 hole. You get a little speed up there before the top of the order. That's where I'd like to see him. I know Mendoza's moved him up a little bit sometimes. I think that's where he is right now and should be. Let him work through it. I think there's value in it. I'm just not there yet, but check in with me in a couple of weeks. I might say I hear Carlos's point, and I might change my mind on that in a couple of weeks. I think he could work things out here at the major league level and get some of that confidence back. But listen, if Mauricio keeps hitting, that will put more pressure on that decision. That's what I will say. There will be more pressure on it.
Matt A.B. Ibanez from Tilmetsu is part entering the chat here. End of June for Ronny, he thinks is the best case scenario. D saying an injury will spring Ronny, which we
probably
just mentioned. And Duran Rivera saying Acuna needs to learn plate discipline, just like you mentioned. Swings at a lot of high fastballs. He's got a lot to work on when it comes up here. Yamid Medina saying I don't see Acuna as an everyday player. I see him more as a utility, and maybe that's good that we have another utility player. We need guys to be able to provide multiple positions like Jeff McNeil does. Probably to a better extent, Acuna is a better defensive player and he has more speed. So maybe at some point he takes on, Jeff McNeil's role as that utility type guy, which I wouldn't be too sad about. So, we'll see what happens there. As we wrap up the show, there's a couple of news and happenings surrounding this team. Sean Reed-Foley was released from the Mets, 3-4, 3.75 ERA in his 4 years with the Mets. We saw glimpses of some good pitching from him, but the guy just was always injured and he can never stay healthy. Came in that Steven Matz trade for the Mets. He could have been someone out of the bullpen. It could have been that long guy, but he just couldn't keep himself healthy.
Yeah, just couldn't. And I mean, it's tough sometimes. Those are the breaks sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And he just couldn't keep himself healthy, and it is what it is. I don't really have too much more to add to that, but it just sometimes
he wasn't around enough. He just wasn't around enough.
No, and the best ability is availability, right? In any sport, like that's the best ability, and he wasn't around enough, and the Mets have to have guys they can rely on. That's something I think this front office, Stearns and Mendoza, they want guys who are available, especially out the pen. I mean, I've loved how the Mets have sort of managed the pen the last couple of years and trying to get arms and deciding what arms they'll move about. And it's like, look, if you're going to be available, dope, that's great. If you can produce, we want that as well too. And if you're not, we're going to keep it moving.
Finally, Frankie Montas started his rehab assignment. We need some backup in the starting rotation for Brooklyn Cyclones. He had 1 1/3 innings pitched, 2 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, 1 strikeout. 20 strikes was thrown, but in 37 pitches. Now, the play-by-play man, Justin Rock, said he struggled with his command, but his fastball was at 93, 95 mile per hour, topping at 96. It's huge to get him back on the mound. The Mets obviously can use more rotation depth on this team, and obviously he'll when he's ready, he's going to go through the spring like, I'm pretty sure Sean Manaea will also go through, but to have him in the rotation, another body in there with a little bit more experience than maybe Tyler McGill, but to get to 6 men in the rotation would be perfect for this team. They need it, and they need the bodies, especially when I'm pretty sure you're starting to see some wear and tear in the bullpen with some of these guys. You're starting to see a little bit of that as well. Clay Holmes starting to give up a little bit more home runs. Reed Garrett struggled a little bit. So it's good to get a fresh body back in there.
Yeah, it'll be huge. Kudos to I will tip my cap to the Mets pitching staff for what they've done thus far this season. I think it's been tremendous. I think it's been arguably the most impressive thing with this team. Through the first 52 games. But Yeah, getting Manaea back, getting Montas back would be huge. I think the Mets are going to play it cautious. They're not going to rush those guys, but just to have that pitching depth, especially for a Mets team that doesn't have like a true ace on the squad, having that pitching depth can be huge for them to get through the season. And hopefully those guys can come in and produce without the pressure of feeling like, oh man, I'm back. Like, I think that's a good thing about Manaea and Montas when they come back. They don't have to feel like, okay, I really got to pick up this pitching staff. They just can ease right into what everybody else has been doing, and just say, hey, we're deeper, we're stronger. And, you got to knock on wood if you're a Mets fan that hopefully they stay healthy. There's going to be some nicks. It's going to happen through the year, some bruises. It might be another injury. But that's why having that depth would be highly, highly important, especially as they move into the middle of the summer.
Kenthal just mentioned no one talking about how Diaz looks like 2022. I did talk about that a little bit earlier on. You're just going to have to go back. Maybe you came in during the middle of the show. Just go back and check that out. We did talk about how good Diaz has looked more as his 2022 self. Dexter, I appreciate the time you've given me. I know I was trying to get us to an hour, but big discussion at the beginning of the show.
We had to have discussion.
We had to let it all out.
No. We had to have discussion. I appreciate it. I love coming on with you on the show. I shout out to all the fans in the chat. Appreciate them too. So thank you, man. I always appreciate when you have me on. It's good to talk some baseball on a Sunday morning, man. Always good.
And let everyone know what you got coming up. I know you got the big Game 3 tonight. You're doing the live stream, so just let everyone know what you got coming on, and hit up your socials, everything.
Yeah, so couple of things coming up. One, as Anthony just mentioned, big Game 3. You're doing a live Knicks watch party. We've been doing it all postseason long. Tapping with us on the New York Post Sports YouTube channel. Myself and Brian Fonseca. Our guest tonight will be Jamal Murphy from Anscape. He'll be joining us in studio to watch the game, talk about it, all good stuff. And then I haven't talked about this publicly. Anthony, I've told you a little bit about this in a couple of months. We will be bringing a new Met show. We're going to have our own new Met show, which Anthony will absolutely be a part of. And the other content creators out there that do great work are going to be a part of it too. Just remember, because we show love to everybody. We're not punching down on anybody here. We're not doing that. The show will debut next Sunday, hopefully. A lot of it depends on what the Knicks do in the playoffs and what we have around it, which is why we pushed back the show. We haven't been able to launch it, but it will likely debut next Sunday. More in the name coming up and everything around that. But it'll be a weekly Met show. Where we talk about the Mets. We have different guests on, like Anthony, Mike Puma will be a part of it. Some of the other people in Mets content creation, former players. It's going to be a fun show. I'm excited to do it, like I've done with New York Got Game. So to do a baseball show now will be really fun weekly, and I hope it's good for the Mets fans and the Mets community. We want everybody to be a part of it. I do not think Michael K will be a guest on the show. I doubt that'll happen. But
he's too big for that. Those bridges,
he's too big to come on. I mean, hey, if he ever wants to come on and talk about it, we can talk about it. I will say everything I said here. I'm not going to back down from that. But yeah, Anthony, I look forward to you being a part of the show. I've talked to you about it. We were trying to develop it for a while. So it's going to be fun. And shout out to Matt Ibanez, Ibby, shout out there. Obviously does a great job with his podcast. And you're going to see a lot of people that I think do good work, and nobody will be calling anybody fleas on the show. We're not doing that. It's going to be, Mets love, and it's going to be fun, man. It's going to be fun. So that's coming up soon. I'm excited to do that with the fans throughout the summer. New York Got Game basketball show will continue throughout the summer. We're transitioning a little bit from Knicks when they're done to Liberty. But you can follow me on all social media platforms at DHenryTV. And please continue to support the great Anthony Rivera, Subway to Shea podcast. It is one of my favorite Mets podcasts. Continue to support it. Continue to support the independent content creators and what they do and all the work they put in, like Anthony talked about. I think it's important for us to uplift, to support each other, to continue to have positivity as we move forward. So, Anthony, thank you, man, for having me. You will be on my you'll see a lot of Anthony on my platform through the summer. So thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
I always appreciate you and the work that you do and the way you have supported not only me, but every content creator that's out there, whether it's Mets, Knicks, every sport has gotten a piece, even the Yankees, yeah. Hector Beauchamp, everybody that has been a part of the work that you do and bringing us to light and all the hard work we put into it. And I'll end the comments here for G Money Stacks. great comment here. Have confidence, consistency, determination, passion, and heart when it comes to having content, video, podcasts, including Mets fans and himself. So that's a good point that he mentioned there. You can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, like the video, subscribe. Also subscribe to New York Post Sports and all the great content they put out as well. If you want to listen to the podcast, should be up a little bit later today on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But if you want to join the conversation and be a part of the live show, like most of you were, 151 of you were today, make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. I think you can also comment if you're watching it on X as well. Now, episode 200, big episode for Subway to Shea coming up. It's going to be, and I know Patty in NYC is in the comments. She was there for this. It's my conversation with Dr. K, the Dr. Dwight Gooden from Catch a Story that I had. I'm going to have that up at some point this week. I call it the Q&A with Dr. K. Make sure you check it out. It was a lot of fun to do, a lot of fun to talk with him and have a great audience out there at Catch a Story. Shout out to the Queens Baseball Convention for putting it all together and for having me be a part of it and moderating the conversation was a lot of fun for me and really a highlight of why I do what I do here. So as this flea, got to speak to Dr. K and enjoy a lot of conversation with him. But yeah, it's episode 200. It's recorded, so there won't be comments in chat. I'll be back Sunday, but this would be out probably halfway through the week, so you guys can enjoy that conversation with the Dr. Dwight Gooden.
Anthony, can I ask you a question before we go?
Yeah, of course.
I think people should. I want to make a comment, but I do have a question for you. I think that Doc Gooden was one of my favorite pitchers. You and I have talked about this before.
Yes.
Grew up a big Mets fan. Doc and Daryl, huge part of the reason I started liking the Mets through my grandmother watching them. When you get an opportunity, for somebody I know who's a fan like you, when you get an opportunity to interview one of your childhood heroes, it's a dope feeling, man. So I want to say one salute to you for that opportunity. I had the feeling this year of interviewing Clyde and also John Starks recently in the past year, which was pretty dope. Just how did it feel to you to do it, man? Because that's my question. How did it feel? Because I know it had to be, I know that feeling. It had to be a good one. How did it feel for you to get that done? Obviously,
it's a little nerve-wracking being at first. I've never been a public speaker. Like, I know I'm doing this video with you. We're having a conversation through, the computer and stuff like that. But to do it in front of a lot of people, to gain that confidence, and for, the great people at the Queens Baseball Convention to have the confidence in me to moderate this conversation with Dwight Gooden. And obviously a lot of work went into it, when it comes to, researching, because I did not get to see Dwight pitch for the Mets. The first thing I led off with was the first time I ever saw him pitch was that Subway Series game, the first game of the doubleheader for the Yankees and taking care of the Mets. So we had a lot of fun talking about that. We talk about his that great and you see all my Mets memorabilia here. The one, I guess, Holy Grail picture that I want is that signed picture of him, Daryl, and Mike Tyson together.
Oh yeah, I want that too. I like that.
I got to get that somehow. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We talked Mets. We talked a little bit about his Yankees career. There were Yankee fans there as well, but everyone was respectful. It was a nice crowd out there at Catch Astoria, and it was a lot of fun for me, and just to even give me confidence in what I do to be a part of this. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and anytime they need me to do one of these things, I'll definitely be out there.
Well, I love that. I'll thank you for answering my question on that. I love that for you, and I love the Catch Astoria. That your podcast has caught their eye and they had the confidence to bring you in, and it's a testament to what you do, man. That's a dope moment. It's one I know you'll never forget, and like just even me knowing you've got to 200 episodes and to have that as your 200th episode, man. Salute to you. That's dope, man. You deserve all the flowers for it, and yeah, I'm happy. I can't wait to listen to the episode. One, because I'm a fan of you. I'm a fan of the good doctor, and yeah. That's a salute, brother. Salute. That's a good one.
It's crazy because, in that week, obviously got to interview Doc, and then I was able to do my first Mets event and be a part of the What's New at Citi Field.
That's right.
When they did the food, and I got to interview Chef Adam Richman of all people, and to be able to interact with a lot of these great people and players, and the reporters, and obviously you've done so much to help me out. And I lost for words, but very just appreciative of every moment that I get to be a part of Subway to Shea and have that name be my brand.
I'm happy for you. I'm just happy for you, man. I like genuinely, I didn't know what you were going to say for the 200th episode. I had no idea, but this is just real live. Like Anthony said it, and I'm just like, it filled me with so much joy, man. I'm just so happy for you. I'm always happy to see other people on their journey, and I try to in my career not take the moments when I'm interviewing people for granted. I've been blessed to do some things I never thought before, so I think that just came up in me, and I just was like, I got to ask you how you felt about it, because I know it had to be big for you, and I'm so proud to see you do it, man. So can't wait to listen. It's gonna be a good one for the fans. Good one.
Yep. And for any content creator out there, just keep working hard. I know Hector in Washington Heights, he's Blunt Thought Sports. He goes, I need to be big enough to be considered for this. You work hard every day and do your content. He's getting up there. He's one of the guys. He's a Mets fan. He works hard, and it's good to see all content creators work hard. We all work together and do this for the love of the Mets, and it's a lot of fun. Dexter, again, I can't thank you enough. Dexter Henry, sports anchor for New York Post Sports, update anchor for WFAN and Infinity Sports Network. He hosts New York Got Game. Make sure you're part of that live stream tonight for Game 3 of the Knicks, and lead host of Urban Fitness Extreme. Follow him at D Henry TV. That wraps it up, the Subway to Shea podcast. For Anthony Rivera, for Dexter Henry, always remember, let's go Mets.